Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. We do educational material on this channel, and today is video number 186 on the reciprocal system of theory. This is a theory that was arrived at by Dewey B. Larson in the 20th century, starting way back in about 1930, all the way up until his death in 1990. And he left behind many books and articles and quite a few followers who are still working on, the finer points of the theory, and quite a few, but not nearly enough. I believe that the theory has demonstrated some great power to really kind of figure out what's going on and to be able to solve a lot of problems, predict a lot of things, and that's why we're covering it here on this channel. The basic idea behind the theory is that we live in a universe of motion. The universe is not made out of matter, it's not made out of energy, but it is made out of motion. And motion is the relationship between space and time. In fact, when Larson first came upon the theory, he didn't even call it motion. He called it space-time. Eventually, at the end of his life, he called it, or he rephrased it as change in 3 dimensions. So if either of those definitions kind of float your boat a little bit better than motion, just can consider that those are things that Larson also used as alternatives, at least at one point. But the basic formulation of Larson's theory is that we live in a universe of motion, and motion is the relationship between space and time. This sets up a generalized reciprocal relationship between space and time. Space and time basically have these same qualities, but they have different manifestations depending on where you are located as the observer in this universe. There are several different sectors that you can enter into. The 4 major ones: time region. I guess those are regions. Within the material sector, there is the time region, and there is the time-space region. And then within the cosmic sector, there is the space-time region and the space region. The material sector and the cosmic sector are separated by the unit boundary, the unit speed boundary. And this unit speed boundary is the speed of light outward in all directions. You can see this as part of the discrete unit postulate. There is a minimum unit of time and a minimum unit of space. There is nothing less than that. Space and time are not continuous, but they come in chunks. And the smallest chunk of space in the smallest chunk of time is the speed of light. So the speed of light is really, unlike what Einstein says, where he says that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe. In Larson's universe, the speed of light is the midpoint of the universe. And really the origin of the universe, the ether, or the null point, or what Larson calls the progression of the natural reference system. So this is the natural reference system in the reciprocal system. He measures from the speed of light and not from 0. He calls that the stationary reference system. Sorry to be distracted. There's like a bumblebee in here, and it's buzzing like crazy, and I don't know where it is. But anyway, space and time also have their coordinate aspects, meaning that they come in multi-dimensions, 3 dimensions, or maybe even more. that is what Larson calls coordinate space and coordinate time. We generally recognize coordinate space, XYZ coordinates. There's also coordinate time. And that really sets up within this material and cosmic sectors. The material sector is the sector that is moving slower than the speed of light. And the cosmic sector is the sector that's moving faster than the speed of light. In the material sector, we have coordinate space and clock time. Clock time is that time is always getting later and later and later. That is the progression of time. And there is also a progression of space that Larson calls clock space. Clock space is the progression of space. Space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart, which was detected by the Hubble telescope in the recession of the distant galaxies way back in I think the 1920s. Now that, if you believe in a different shape of the Earth, then you would have to kind of adjust that Hubble telescope accordingly as to what it's actually interpreting. Those were even before the days of NASA. So who knows if they were fudging that, or if they were just observing something as something else. I'm an agnostic on these matters. I'm trying to harmonize the reciprocal system and really even kind of use the reciprocal system to figure out actually what's going on with space, outer space, and the shape of the universe and the shape of the Earth. So anyway, what we have is a material sector where we have coordinate space and 3D space and 1D time that is progressing in a scalar manner, meaning that there is a motion, but there is no direction. And then in the cosmic sector, we have 3D time, coordinate time, that is progressing in a scalar manner in 1D space. And so those have a reciprocal relationship. So even though we only really see time, we really only see space, we do not see time. And so all of our measurements generally are carried out in the material sector. But we can still know what is going on in the cosmic sector because it is the exact reciprocal of what's going on in the material sector. So we can extrapolate our experiences in the material sector as to what's actually going on in the cosmic sector. Okay, now we're looking at Larson's 1979 book that is called it is called Nothing But Motion. And this book is primarily on atomic physics. We're in chapter 12 right now, which is on basic mathematical relations. And I'm going to back up and read this pretty difficult paragraph and then move into the new material after that. The inversion of space and time at the unit level also has an important effect on the dimensions of interregional relations. Now, there's really 3 unit levels. There's a unit speed level, that is the progression of the natural reference system, or the speed of light outward in all directions. But then there is also the unit time boundary, greater than or less than the speed, the unit of time, and the unit space boundary, greater than or less than the unit of space. The unit of space is approximately 4.56 times 10 to the minus 8 meters, and the unit of time is the very, very small 1.52 times 10 to the minus 16 seconds. So that is, 1/6 quadrillionth of a second. Very, very small. It appears to be continuous, but it isn't. So those are the three boundaries, and when you cross those boundaries, you basically move inside out. Like the rules change at the boundaries. And for example, if you go inside the time region, the progression of the natural reference system is no longer moving outward. It's moving outward, but it's moving outward in time instead of space, which we perceive as moving inward in space. And its opposite force, which is gravity, or so-called gravity, is normally moving inward in space, but in the time region, it reverses and it is moving inward in time, which we perceive as moving outward in space. Okay. Inside unit space, no changes in space magnitudes can take place, since less than unit space does not exist. However, as pointed out earlier, the motion in time, which can take place inside the space unit, is equivalent to a motion in space because of the inverse relation between space and time. An increase in the time aspect of a motion in this inside region, the time region, where space remains constant at unity, from 1 to t, is equivalent to a decrease in the space aspect from 1 to 1 over t. Where the time is t, the speed in this region is equivalent space, 1 over t, divided by time, t. So the total there is 1 over t squared. So when you're measuring something in the time region, you kick up the dimensionality to a second dimension, 1 over t squared. So the equivalent space that you get is kicked up by a dimension to the second power, whereas before all of the measurements were first power measurements. In the region outside unit space, the speed corresponding to 1 unit of space and time, t, is 1 over t. Now we find that in the time region, it is 1 over t squared. The time region speed and all quantities derived therefrom, which means all of the physical phenomena of the inside region, the time region, and the space region for that matter, as all of these phenomena are manifestations of motion, are therefore second power expressions of the corresponding quantities of the outside region. This is an important principle that must be taken into account in any relation involving both regions. The intra-region relations may be equivalent. That is, the expression A equals BE is the mathematical equivalent of the expression A squared, A equals BC is the mathematical equivalent to the expression A squared equals B squared C squared. But if we measure the quantity A in the outside region, it is essential that the equation be expressed in the correct regional form, A equals B squared C squared. Although the difficulties which the reciprocal system of theory does not encounter do not enter into the development of thought in these pages, and, strictly speaking, have no real place in the discussion, it may be of interest, while we are considering some of the factors that enter into the phenomena of the very small dimensions, to point out that the theory of a universe of motion is free from the problem of infinities that plagues all conventional theories in this physical area. Richard Feynman gives us a candid assessment of the existing theoretical situation. Quote, "We really do not know exactly what it is that we are assuming that gives us the difficulty producing infinities. A nice problem," end quote. However, it turns out that it is possible to sweep the infinities under the rug by a certain crude skill, and temporarily we are able to keep on calculating. I guess this is a continuation of the quote from Feynman. However, it turns out that it is possible to sweep the infinities under the rug by a certain crude skill, and temporarily we are able to keep on calculating. We have all these nice principles and known facts, but we are in some kind of trouble. Either we get the infinities or we do not get enough of a description. We are missing some parts. And that is the end of the quote. The reciprocal system is free. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry about that interruption. We're going to just go through the last paragraph of this chapter, chapter 12. The reciprocal system is free of these problems because it is a fully quantized system of theory. Every physical phenomenon, this theory tells us, is a manifestation of motion, and every motion involves at least one unit of space and one unit of time. For convenience, we may identify a point within a unit of space or time, but such a point has no independent existence. Nothing less than one unit of either space or time exists in the universe of motion. Okay, now that's the end of chapter 12. Moving into chapter 13. Chapter 13 is called Physical Constants. And I think we'll just do a paragraph or two of this to get started. Because motion and its components, space and time, exist only in units, the derivatives of motion, dimensional variations of the basic relation between space and time, such as acceleration, force, etc., also exist only in natural units. A natural unit of force, for example, is a natural unit of time divided by a two-dimensional natural unit of space. It then follows that where a relation of the kind discussed in chapter 12 is correctly stated, it is valid as a quantitative relation between units without any arbitrary constant. The expression F equals ma, for example, tells us that one natural unit of force applied to one natural unit of mass will produce an acceleration of one natural unit. When all quantities are expressed in natural units, there are no numerical constants in equations of this kind, aside from what we may call structural factors. Geometrical factors such as the number of effective dimensions, numerical factors such as the second and third powers of the quantities entering into the relations, and so on. There has been a great deal of speculation as to the nature and origin of the fundamental constants of present-day physics. An article in the September 4th, 1976 issue of Science News, for example, contends that we are confronted with a dilemma, inasmuch as there are only two ways of looking at these constants, neither of which is really acceptable. We must either, the article says, swallow them ad hoc, without justification for their necessity, their constancy, or their values, or we must accept the Machian hypothesis that they are, in some unknown way, determined by the contents of the universe as a whole. The development of the reciprocal system of theory has now resolved this dilemma in the same way that it handled a number of the long-standing problems considered in the earlier pages, that is, by exposing it as fictitious. When all quantities are expressed in the proper units, the natural units of which the universe of motion is constructed, the fundamental constants reduce to unity and vanish. Okay, we'll leave it there for today and move into the meat of chapter 13 starting tomorrow. Just kind of try to hang in there. Hopefully you're reviewing some of my previous videos and you're becoming a little bit more comfortable with the terminology that Larson uses and that I use to describe this stuff. I think that the terminology is one of the major barriers to understanding the reciprocal system. And I think you just have to recognize that he's describing a different paradigm. And so when you do that, you have to kind of make up your own words for it and hope that those words kind of resonate with people as being meaningful. And so, you know, don't reject it out of hand just because you don't understand it at first blush. Just try to get comfortable with the terminology over time. Okay, that'll do it for me. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.